Welcome to Season 3, Sounds of Solar Podcast. We've got a whole new thing this year. We've got 3 new hosts. We're going to cover a whole range of stuff in this season about EVS, about solar industry at large, and probably other things in the renewable sector. And it's going to be awesome. Sounds of Solar, Season 3. Let's go. All right, welcome to Season 3, Sounds of Solar Podcast from EVS. You're probably wondering, who am I? But more importantly, who are my new co-hosts?
Hey, Prahalad Shivshankaran here. I'm a project engineer here at EVS. I've been here at EVS for about 2 years now. But before EVS, I was working as a power electronics engineer at Allen Systems. I did that for 4 years. But yeah, I've been in the industry for about 6-7 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about how time flies. But yeah, did that for 4 years and then pivoted and decided I wanted to get a little bit more electrical design experience building PV and BESS systems. So yeah, that's what I do right now and help do that. So
What about you, Russ?
Russell Hamilton. I'm one of the power study project managers. So I started out a little non-traditional. I was an electrician for many years. I think started back in 2009. And then as an electrician, I worked with a lot of electrical engineers and kind of talked me into going back to school.
You were like, I want to be one of those nerds?
They kind of talked me into it. It made sense at the time, so I did. And then
Does it still make sense?
Yes. So I spent a year in the aerospace industry. I thought I really wanted to work in the industry, and it just didn't really turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. So then I ended up working for a company doing substation design and did that for about 5 years. While I was there, got into some grounding studies, and been at EVS now for about almost 3 years, and came over to do grounding studies and just moved into a project management position.
Yeah, nice. You must be very well grounded.
Very grounded.
Yeah, at work.
It was very grounded at work.
there's actually a bunch of us from the aerospace industry, I think.
I also worked in aerospace.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, somehow. I don't know how steel pile design translates to designing an airplane, but they didn't need to know that at the time.
That's fair.
So,
how about you? Give us your background.
Yeah.
Well, EVS, a little over 2 years now, doing the structural side of things. And before that, I did my 5 years in traditional building consulting, which I worked in we designed these precast concrete components, which was actually kind of a cool job in the structural, traditional structural engineering field. And before that, I worked in an earthquake testing lab at the U of M called the MAST Laboratory, the Multi-Axial Sub-Assemblage Test Laboratory, which we tested full-scale structural assemblies for buildings subjected to seismic loads. It sounds a lot more glorious maybe than it was day to day. It was a lot of just hands-on, dirty, tensioning filthy bolts and stuff, which I liked that at that time. And then before that, I started in aerospace, working on an all-composite turboprop 8-seater aircraft, and it was a startup company, and it didn't make it because. Do you have any idea how hard it is to start an airplane company?
I'm just surprised that why in Minneapolis are we testing earthquake?
It was in Duluth. The earthquake one.
Yeah.
Like
we have seismic activity.
Because there's no seismic activity. Possibly. Okay. I don't know. No, I think the way that all went down is there was an RFP put out for universities, and then they basically certain universities put in their proposal, and Minneapolis or the U of M was one of them that got a lab. But there was shake tables out in California and places in Florida and the East Coast and stuff. So, but yeah, we ran out of funding, so that's where I changed over to the building company. But anyway, moving swiftly on. So that's a little bit about you guys. What are you excited about for this upcoming season? Prahalad, what's on your mind?
I think for me, just getting to know from you guys about how the industry works, what you guys see, the path forward for the industry, the obstacles for the industry. And also, it's just a learning platform for me as well. I think I listen to podcasts generally to just educate myself.
You're like the podcast machine.
Yeah,
I just all day.
All day doing that in the background
all
while
night.
I'm just working. Even when I'm in the car sometimes.
What's your breakdown? Are you 60% focused on the podcast, 40% on the work?
It depends if I'm doing it.
That's a great engineering answer. It depends. It depends.
Depends.
Yeah.
No, if I'm doing AutoCAD work, to be honest, that time I could probably listen to a podcast, but if
I miss
I'm actually
that.
doing,
I don't. You don't have that either, do you? No.
I used to when I used to be in the weeds. I could just put something on. Now
You can't do it.
No, you can't do it.
It's just like client calls, Zoom messages, client calls, Zoom messages.
Yeah, I think you guys as PMs are probably just stuck in meetings every
You're not
first
wrong.
half of the day, and then
Yeah,
First half.
I love it.
That is the whole half of the day.
I like it though. It's I'm okay at best as a technical engineer, but I'm way better at like just talking to people. Like I'm talking to you right now. It's like we're doing it right now.
I think you and I are very similar in that sense. I'm okay technically. I probably can hold my own depending on what we're talking about. But when it just comes to the client interaction and the people interaction, that's my bread and butter.
Well, what about this upcoming season? What are you excited about?
I'm excited to my goal. I'll just share. My goal was to beat Raj's highest viewing numbers from his previous years of podcasts. So.
Listeners will remember Raj is the previous host of the Sounds of Solar.
But no, it's very similar. Excited to get to know both of you a little bit more, obviously, and just understand structural more. And obviously, I work with PV quite a bit, but just to understand our different views. And I'm excited for the guests we're gonna have on, and to be able to get to know more what their opinions are and their stances are and how they view the industry. So.
Right. For myself, we have a lot to cover. I think we're going to talk about things at EVS, how they relate to the solar industry, what our expertise is. We're a full one-stop shop. You can basically design any old solar plant you want coming here. We can do everything for our clients. But, what we do internally, how our processes work, and also how we relate to the industry and industry news. What is happening. So I think we have a lot of interesting topics for our listeners. All right, moving on. We're exiting 2023. 2024 is upon us. What are you guys seeing coming up? Concerns, excitement, anything? Prahalad, what do you think?
I think just day to day, what I see in terms of projects coming in, they're not cookie cutter anymore, like in terms of project sizes as well as like land availability and things. So I think that's something that going forward, just the challenges in designing PV with these kind of land challenges, I would say, or like these different arrangements is going to be, that's a big challenge. Then the second thing I think is for me is just the evolving technology, whether it be lithium ion and even perovskite.
Perovskite, there it is.
I think is that what it is?
Yeah,
I think the new I think the new solar cells are much more efficient.
Yep.
So I think just evolving technology, and then I think the biggest is interconnection.
So what about interconnection though? I have no idea what that means on a more granular level. Can you describe that?
I have a high level understanding of it, but basically there's a cap to how much you can actually put onto the grid in terms of how much solar or BESS you can actually connect to the grid system. And the cap is mainly because of the existing infrastructure as well as...
So it's basically like trying to get more cars on the highway, but the highway is only like this big, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. So that's... And then also the other challenge is there are studies that need to be run, and I don't know exactly what these studies are, but
interconnection studies.
Is it really just
what you might call
studies?
An interconnection study?
Yeah, so those take time to run. I think that's why. I think there are different approaches being looked at. I think they're looking at the Texas model of how Texas has been able to implement and interconnect things much faster compared to other regions. So.
One thing I want to riff on too, what you said about projects are getting larger, and then site conditions are also changing. I think it's a general theme in solar that all of the good sites are quote unquote taken, and that's whether that's true or not. It's true in the sense that we do get a lot of challenging sites, and I'm sure that there's a lot of electrical concerns. I know on the structural side of things, like soil type varies from project to project, and we get projects that are really bad, and that has implications for the driven pile sizes, the embedment depths, and it does create a lot of issues that I think you don't always find out about that until later on in the process. And it's something that definitely impacts the overall financing of the project, the effort the engineering teams need to go into. And and
the soil type probably changes within the project site as well, right? Like depending on how
it can,
big
very
how big
different
the site is
zones,
too, right?
and that affects the resistivities of soil for buried cable, etc. So, Russell, what are you thinking about 2024?
It's kind of similar. I think the complexity of our projects are getting so much more, but I think the biggest challenge is schedule. We have these really complex projects now, and the finance schedule is still very tight. And so that presents a lot of challenges to meet these internal, external deadlines. You know, when I first started solar, a 75 megawatt project was huge. I mean, if we don't break 200, it's not a big project.
Exactly.
I think average is 200, 300, something.
Yeah, it's
like that.
probably 200 average at least now. And
Right.
I know we have some coming online that are
I got a
500.
I got a 608. I got a 608 that I'm finishing right now. A 608 megawatts project, so it's pretty large. But it's just the idea, you know, from just the industry, you know, that the time it takes to do a 75 megawatt project, they're thinking it should still take the same time for a 200 or 300 or 400 megawatt project. And then the same issues that you all are talking about with the, you know, the complexity of the site itself causes a lot of issues that need to be vetted and looked into.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a challenge to address. We can't do that in 6 weeks. We can't do that in 8 weeks, you know, because it's such a large project. But people who are making decisions financially are like, no, we need to get it done.
Yeah.
So that's I think is a challenge. Maybe setting expectations, you know, for these really large, complex problems, or on our end, trying to find unique ways to. I don't want to say the word efficient because I think we're pretty efficient, but finding ways to do things differently that could speed up the process.
Yeah.
Would that mean like coordination, early coordination on certain things that could affect like a project, maybe like soil type, those kind of things, right?
Early coordination is very important. Making sure that certain early investigation, like for geotech, is being done. So I think one of the things I've noticed, I'm sure as a structural, you probably see this too, like the early investigation from the geotech, it's very minimal. If we can get them, you know, because they're usually a year or two before they actually start the project. If we can get the early investigations to do a deeper geotechnical investment and actually get better results, so we actually know what the site's going to be like. I have a project right now where they're digging into it and they just found out the bedrock is at like 4 feet and 2 feet across the site. Well, how do you build a site like that? It's a huge, huge project, and it's, you know, wasn't, you know, flagged until we've already started design.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah. I mean, these are kind of the classic issues that arise on our side as a consultant. And then you have a contractor and then also an owner. And like, there's never going to be perfect communication there.
Right.
Obviously, we want the best technical information right away. And do we get it? Not typically. Yeah. We do our best, of course. So yeah, for 2024, what am I thinking? I think for structural specific, let's just maybe touch on that for a moment. There's some changes coming into the IBC, the International Building Code, and all solar PV structures are going to move from risk category 1 to risk category 2. And what does this mean? This is just the design wind loading that is specified for these type of structures. And to give you an idea that, you know, maybe a risk category 1 structure might be 100 miles an hour wind speed, and a risk category 2 might be like 107 or 110, something in this range. Wind speed is a exponential relationship. So that's not just 7% more. It's actually more like 10 to 15% more load, and then extrapolate that on 50,000 driven piles. So I think owners out there should be aware that this is a change that's coming, and your steel cost is, if you're not savvy about options, is going to go up by 10 to 15%, which in today's economic climate, I don't know how much more budget there are for these projects. That's another thing that concerns me, to just kind of segue, is we've been in a high interest rate climate for 18 months now, maybe a little bit more. Yeah. How is this affecting financing for these projects? These projects are not cheap to build, certainly. So I'm curious to see how that plays out in 2024. I think there's a lot of exciting technology, but I think we have a lot of hurdles on the financing side. We have hurdles on the structural side, like I mentioned.
But yeah, just talking about the financing side, I think, like you guys pointed out, I think for scale to happen, like you need to have repeat processes. And I think that's where like we are running into challenges as well, right? Like I think if we had cookie cutter processes in place, then it's very easy to like, okay, start a project and finish it with no issues. And then the minute any deviations happen, we now have cost implications. And then I think that needs to be considered from the owner's side. And I think that's something we need to point out, that like it's no longer cookie cutter in nature, and that they need to understand that things are changing, sites are changing, and then just kind of preemptively look at like do projections and analytics to kind of figure out if it's actually viable, projects are viable or not.
It's so tough because like, you know, you factor in things like supply chain and like, we're changing the modules. Now we're changing the inverters. And it's like, you know, we have no control over that. I think that the owners don't have any control over that either. It's like what's available, what they thought was going to be available. And it's always in flux, and it's always going to be like that, which is, it makes it interesting. Maybe it's not the good kind of interesting, but
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, certainly.
You know?
So yeah,
there's a lot of retrofitting going on at, you know, 90% IFC of like, oh, those modules, we can't get those now.
Right.
We got to redo the project starting after we submit like a 90 or an IFC. I have plenty of projects like that. So I see that continuing to happen in 2025. Like you said, I don't know how you how do you mitigate that?
Unless an owner has 3 million safe harbors modules just at the warehouse. And a billion inverters too. Like it's.
Although you say that, there are definitely owners that I work with who are stockpiling. This equipment.
It's a smart thing to do. I think if you can get what you need now, you better just get it, because you're going to be building solar for the next 10 years easily.
I'm sure there's some risk, obviously, that they have to consider, but you know, solar's not going anywhere.
Not anytime soon.
You know. So
it's a great time to call EVS to do your solar project.
Shameless plug.
Okay, wrapping up, you know, we got the 3 new hosts here. We talked a little bit about our professional background earlier. What about your non-professional background? What do you like to do outside of work for our listeners who are so curious? Russ?
So my family has been in sprint car racing since before I was born. So I'm really into that. My family no longer owns a car or races. A couple years ago, they kind of called it, but I'm still very involved with, you know, friends and family who continues to race, and I tend to travel as much as I can. This year's not been as much, but previous years, you know, maybe I go to 20, 25 different racetracks around the country.
It's a super tight-knit, all racing is like that. It's very like, you're part of the big racing family, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, and so that's what I like to do. I like to take my kids to that. I like to go by myself. I like to just be there, spend time with my family. My uncle's really big into it, so he lives in California. It gives me an excuse to see him. You know, we meet up somewhere and stay together. And you know,
what's the best track?
Oh boy,
I'd say
that's a tough one. I'll give you top 3.
Top 3 is good.
My personal favorites would maybe be Knoxville and Iowa, which is, you know, just it's where the Sprint Car Hall of Fame is located. Amazing half-mile dirt track. I've been to Eldora, Ohio, which is another huge half-mile dirt track, which I just absolutely love that track. And then I grew up going to Chico, and I really like that dirt track in California. So
Are all of the tracks the same?
No.
Are they all ovals?
Yes.
Do you ever?
Well,
do you ever turn right?
You never turn right. No.
We're not turning right.
They're all circular, but they all have different shapes. I mean, they have some tracks they're called paper clips. You have some tracks that, you know, have a straightaway, back and front straightaway. You have some tracks that are small enough they're quarter mile. It's just a circle.
It's just literally a circle.
They call them bull rings, right?
Bull rings.
And those are the more fun, in my opinion. Those are more fun tracks to watch.
Prahalad, what are you doing from your 5 to 9 and on the weekends?
So I'm a very outdoor person. So I love going on hikes and just exercising in general. I think sometimes if I don't exercise, I feel incomplete. So that's the kind of guy I was. I mean, now I'm recovering from an injury, but before that, I used to play a lot of soccer almost every day, and then go to the gym every day. So that's kind of like my routine outside of work. I would try and get as much steps in. I think there was a point where I was doing about.
How's your Walktober going?
Walktober, I'm okay. I think Andy's disappointed in me, but
oh no,
yeah. he goes to Korea, gets all his 20,000 steps in, and then he punches
it's a lot of pressure to be
like, he was on vacation. He could stay. He could just walk all day.
Right.
You had to listen to podcasts and
then no walk.
Do AutoCAD.
Try to figure out who's on Dennis's team because they would win.
Oh yeah,
bike riding.
Right. But, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I watched a lot of soccer on the side. So, but yeah, that's kind of what I do. And then,
What's your favorite team? Or what league do you follow, or do you follow all of the Premier Leagues?
just the Premier League.
Yeah.
Just the Premier. So it's the English Premier League that I
Yep.
follow. So I
Who's your
support
team?
Chelsea.
Chelsea.
I love watching the games at Brits and like the atmosphere of just having the fans. I think that's the best kind of atmosphere to like watch a game.
For
Do
sure.
you ever go to the games here in town?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the finals I've attended, like Brits Pub, which is there downtown. So that's a nice spot to go
No,
catch
but
a
do
game.
you, do you go to the
Like
stadium?
the stadium? Yeah, I've watched a couple of games. I think I watched
This is
Minnesota.
Brits Pub in downtown Minneapolis, and then
Downtown.
also MN United.
Sponsor us. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the stadium's pretty cool, but I think the NFL stadium is way
Yeah.
that's a
Mhm.
different like
Yeah.
beast. So
Yeah.
but yeah, that's kind of what I do on the
Right on.
side.
As for myself, a few things. I'm a hyper addicted cyclist. I love biking and anything that comes with it, any kind of racing like that. I'm a super MotoGP racing addict. I've got into MotoGP probably 10, 11 years ago and haven't been able to put it down yet. And I've got a gig tonight in the band I play in, so that's kind of what I do on the outside of things.
So tell me about the band. Do you sing? Do you play instrument? What do you do both?
I sing and I play guitar, and
Okay.
we're now a
Nice.
3-piece, which has been an interesting change, and I think it's definitely for the better. We kind of developed our own sound. Well, we started playing together in the pandemic, and it was just for fun, and then suddenly we had an EP, and then suddenly we had another EP, and then now we have a full length that's not recorded, but that has all changed. So we found a very distinct sound, and I'm definitely into it. Whereas before, I think I was just kind of like, oh, this is something to do. And now it's definitely a defined, like, good project.
What's
So what's
the-
the what's
yeah,
the
what's the-
sound? What is it kind of? Tell me what it
The
sounds like.
theme is, let's call it Space Cowboy.
Love it.
Space Cowboy.
It's like
Love it.
like heavier
Is it
rock
grunge?
music.
Okay.
It's not like, I wouldn't say it's like country, but it's like, it's kind of like has some outlaw flavor, but it's like heavier rock, but then there's like a twinge of some sort of like, gunslinging or something. But all the like lyrical content's all like very like space oriented
Okay.
in a loose sense. So that's it. We found like a niche that I think totally works.
Where do you guys release? Like on Spotify? And what's
We're
the
on,
band called
we're on
again?
Spotify. The band is, or maybe was called Quarterback Club,
Okay.
but I think we're going to be a different band now that
Okay.
we're a 3-piece and it's a new record, etc. So we'll see about that. But
And where are you performing tonight?
we're playing at Cadence Records in St. Paul tonight.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
Nice.
but
Yeah.
that will not affect any of our listeners. All right, let's wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for listening. We're going to be back with episode 2. Be on the look. It's going to be on all the platforms. Sounds of Solar, season 3. Let's go.
Peace.
We did it. That went really well.